Yeah. When I first got the email and was asked to do this talk, I was dumbfounded because the email that I got, this is from my office, from my secretary, said, evaluation do's and do's. And I go, isn't that supposed to be do's and don'ts? And then I thought, okay, maybe there's a desire to be more positive about it. And instead of telling them not to do the wrong thing, uh, keep telling them to do the right thing. And so, okay, that works for me too. But then later on, when I got the email from Dolly, it said do's and don'ts. I said, oh my God, my office was wrong. And so I had to change the slide. That's why it's now like this. All right. So very quickly, this is who I am, and that's been explained already. So just so that you'll know where I'm coming from. Saan ba yung hugot niya nanggagaling? No? So, yan. There you go. And when it says white paper presentations, it's when I help people, managers, senior officers, organizations, defend their presentations for their Six Sigma competitions. And so I went so far already from just evaluating speeches to evaluating people who have to win, for their organization. Raul is part of my team. From time to time I call on him. So is Sassy Casas and Con Abraham. I don't know if some of them are familiar to you. Anyway, moving on. Let me give you a quick outline about what I'm going to go through. So here they are. The easiest part will be number 1, and you'll see later why. 2 would be practical tools for you to use, because some of us, when we prepare for an evaluation role, we're very much stuck into using the Toastmasters model for doing that, and for the most part that's fine, especially when you're new, when you're starting. But as you evolve, and all of us do evolve, we grow, you start discovering that there are other tools that we should be using, that we should be considering to close that gap that exists in a lot of companies that says, why should we have a Toastmasters club here? This public speaking has nothing to do with the kind of speaking that we do at work. And so, for the most part as well, that's true, that perception is true. Because when your boss asks you, so how did your sales go? Did you reach your projected targets? And you go, good morning, sir. I remember when. So, and if you're like me, you're going to start thinking, that's going to sound creepy. Why is it that when I'm talking to you, you always sound like you're giving a speech? Well, what your boss is really just asking is for a brief performance review or performance report, which could be, oh, thanks for asking. As a matter of fact, we're doing fine because, and then that's when you go into your PPF, or that's when you go into your SMG. I remember a time when I was still very much single. One of the things that happened to me, and it was very funny because I dated a Toastmaster as well, and then she goes, Dino, why is it that every time you talk to me, you sound like you're giving a speech? I said, do I? Because everything was so organized, so formatted, and there was the total absence of us. And so she apparently didn't like that. And guys, all the single boys here, let me tell you just one thing. It's going to creep the girl out that you're going to go out with if you are so perfect. So, when you go out there, when you meet them, you need to sprinkle it with a few ums and ahs, make them feel that you just feel as awkward as they do, because that way you'll be able to connect with them better. Alright? Okay. So, we'll have a look at tools and 3 applications. In other words, your world doesn't stop or start and stop with the Toastmasters. Ultimately, you're doing this because you want to get better at something else. Diba? Yun. So, we'll look at applications. And number 4, staying sharp, keeping that knife well honed. Ayan. So, onwards and onwards. So, out loud please, everybody.
Asking students to think about their work before receiving feedback scratches out the soil in the brain so the feedback seeds have a place to settle in and grow.
That's right. I've often found that when I coach people, especially, say, the owner of a company, for instance, I can actually mention one because the others have me signing a non-disclosure. Don't you just hate that?
Yeah.
But we can't get around it. But there's one who allows me to. Joe Magsaysay, Potato Corner. So, but I'm one of his ghost writers. So every time he has a speech to give, and he confided in me one time, he said, Dino, I actually hate public speaking. I'm very nervous, and I'd much rather ride my motorcycle doing motocross out in Montalban than to give a speech. Let me do that the whole day rather than to give a 5-minute talk, he said. And so I had to write the speeches for him. But before I did that, I did two things. I would listen to him talk, so I'd get a feel for his speech patterns, so that when I write it, it sounds like him and not like me. Number two, I'd ask him for some examples of his work first, so that I could analyze how his mind works, and then before I give him feedback, in other words. So that's why I decided to show this to you first. Because if you really want to help somebody grow, if you really want to help somebody evolve, it's not just critiquing their speech after, but it's challenging them to think about it before they even deliver it. Because in the Toastmasters, one of the nicest things we have going for us here is we have a mentorship relationship with our new members, right? You have to sort of like hold their hand during the first 6 speeches, and that's fine. But if what we normally do is we say, okay, you're working on project number 3, so you write your speech, you call me, you let me know if you need help, etc., etc., then we'll see each other next meeting, I'll evaluate your speech. And normally that's all that we really do. But if you really want to help somebody, and you are going to be their evaluator, not just their mentor, you need to be there during the different stages of their preparation. So that ideally, when you get to see them, you're there mainly boosting their self-esteem by pointing out how they've improved, rather than pointing out what they did wrong and then embarrassing them and hurting their self-esteem, right? So that's why I would like to tell everybody that evaluation is, and there's so many definitions for it, but the one I really like the most is simply this. Agreed?
Yes.
That's all it really is. Tell people what you think. Because if they bother to ask you, what do you think? And then you give feedback. But the cue there is for you to figure out and decide, how am I supposed to give feedback? Now, that's an important question. Why? Because it's a cultural issue. It's a cultural issue. Sometimes it's even a generational issue. I wonder if you will be able to resonate with me. Here's the 2 reasons why. Number 1, it's a generational issue, because if you look at me and kami ni Raul, we're part of what we call SWAB, Samahan ng mga nagpapatina ng buhok. Okay, so our generation, we did love the times when we were evaluated harshly. You know, I was the guy who, because I had to pay for my membership out of my meager allowance. Imagine me, Scholar ng Bayan, UP Diliman. And so I had somehow to survive on 360 pesos a week. And if you want to wrap your mind around that, you know, eh paano? 4 na piso lang yung ulam sa area sa UP noon eh. Diba? Unlimited rice, unlimited soup, ulam lang yan. So you learn how to chop up your food into really tiny pieces so that magkasya yung kanin mo doon, diba? And I had to pay for my membership. Now, make a long story short, what this did for me was, it made me pay for my membership and made me have the mindset that said, I know that I did some things well, but tell me what I did wrong. So I valued my evaluators who were very harsh, who were very strict, even those who failed me, you know, even though we're not supposed to pass or fail people, right? I valued them, and if I'm any good today, it's because of all those really harsh people. Right? So that's a generational thing. These days, we don't do that, or younger people tend to not want that, because, well, YOLO, you only live once. You diss me today, you criticize me today, I'm gone tomorrow, I'm looking for a new job. You know, stuff like that can happen, right? Yeah, so medyo mas maingat tayo ngayon. But that's where I'm coming from. So sometimes when I give evaluations, tama yung sinabi ni previous speaker natin si Kirk, you look at who you're going to evaluate, because they'll tell you where he's coming from, right? Now, when I talk about culture, it's also another thing, because when you work within a corporate structure, depends. Like, for example, Smart has a very different culture from Globe, and I've served them both, no? So, I can't tell you what I did for them, but I can tell you I've been there. So they're very, very different. So in one company, they're fond of making you experience a sense of mortality. In other words, they can make you really feel this big after your critique. In another one, they're there to build you up. Part of their saying is, it's alright to make mistakes, just don't make them twice. Yeah, no? And meron pang kasabihan doon na, okay lang magkamali because that's how you learn, that's how you grow. But by all means, please make your mistakes early so that it only cost the company 4 figures. If you make your mistakes later, it'll cost us 7. And that'll be painful. So go ahead, magkamali ka habang bago ka. You know, that's the way they do it. So when I evaluate, again, I take into consideration the culture. So I know whether kailan ba dito tough love, diba? Or kailan ba dito diplomacy. Yeah. So, moving along. Out loud, please.
Remember to make sure your feedback is helpful.
That's right. It's really upsetting to me when, for example, when I joined a speech contest before, 1983, wow, a long time ago. When I joined it, and sometimes as you move up the rankings, you know, from club to area to division and finally national, then you hear your fellow competitors start to give their evaluation. Then I remember sitting in the small room where they keep the contestants, wincing from time to time. Napapaganon ako kasi sabi ko, bakit ba naman sila ganun? Why are they like that when they're giving their feedback? What's all of this focus on delivery? Where my feeling is, if it's all about delivery, napakababaw nung feedback na binibigay nila. No? So I'm really more concerned about objectives or what we call content. And at the end of the day, whether you're gesturing or not is less important than whether you change that person's life as a result of what you said, right? And so that's what I'm saying. We need to be very specific because sometimes we give feedback that's not really very helpful to the person in a meaningful way. Diba? So, continuing. This is what I have in terms of when I think about giving feedback to a person. Pakibasa lang. Number 1,
Being fair.
praise,
and suggest.
In other words, we never impose. Because I've heard some Toastmasters, especially when I was new in the movement a long time ago, where they would almost like demand that the person improve by doing this. Nag-i-insist sila. And you can never do that because this is a voluntary organization. We pay to be members. You know, we're not employees. And so what you say has to be an offering. And it's really up to them whether they take it or leave it. Yeah. Number 2,
Being helpful.
yeah, there's a 2:4 ratio. So some of you will ultimately want to join a contest, right? Hopefully, some of will. No? Sali ka na impromptu speaking or ng evaluation contest. Now, let me just tell you that so many people will find something nice to say about the test speaker, whoever that person is. Marami silang makikita. But the judges aren't looking for what you found nice in the test speaker. They're looking for the quality of your suggestions. And when I competed, this was the mindset that I had. If I'm going to praise that person for 2 things that he did well, I need to have 4 things that he can work on. I need to have 4. Because that's one of the things that I observed when I started to compete on a club, area, division level. Minsan isa lang nasasabi nila, minsan dalawa lang nasasabi nila. And why? Sometimes it's not because they didn't have anything to say, it's because they ran out of time. Sa sobrang focus nila sa mga magagandang nagawa, you know, the nice things that the person did, they look at the clock, oh, dilaw na. So I only have time for just one thing for you to improve on. So, there goes his trophy. It's mine now. You know, so then I think that way because 2:4. You give 2 things that you notice he did well. Mention 4 things he can improve on. So far, so good?
Yes.
Yeah. Number 3, out loud, please.
Being precise.
I'm sorry. Kalimutan ko yung close parenthesis. Yeah. Quote exactly what you heard in what he said so that he will understand the portion that you are critiquing. Because sometimes we'll just give a blanket statement about the person's speech, and that becomes so unfair because he wants to improve, but he can't quite figure out what on earth are you talking about? Which part of my talk are you mentioning, right? So we need to be very precise about things like that. Now, out loud, please.
Speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. Listen in such a way that others love to speak to you.
All right, and I love this when I found this, and I felt bad that it's anonymous because I would have wanted to give that person credit. Nonetheless, let me just say that sometimes what we are trained to say in Toastmasters doesn't always work as well as we'd like it to. Would you like to find out what I'm specifically referring to? Okay. So, let me talk about how we drop the other shoe. Remember when we give evaluations, we say nice stuff first. Then later on, we talk about the other stuff, right? So, he's heard the first shoe drop. So, he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now, this is something that I'm going to talk about that will link what we do in Toastmasters directly into what we do on the job. How many here are managers or supervisors? Raise your hand. Let's see. Great. There's a lot of you. And this is where your membership in Toastmasters will pay off in huge dividends. And I'm referring to an event in our corporate life we call the PA. Performance appraisal. Twice a year, sometimes once a year, ideally more than that. But from time to time, we do call our employee to have a meeting with us and we discuss how that person did, right? And so here's a conversation that we normally have with them and is, well, sometimes patterned after what we're doing in Toastmasters. So we say stuff like, Joey, I really like the fact that you're such a brilliant person, you're always on time, everybody likes you. However, right? And then when they hear that word, all of a sudden they flush everything else you've said before. And now they're like, Star Trek, shields up. And oh my God, here it is. What have I done wrong this time? And so we don't really want that, right? Because then they become defensive. Whatever it is that we're going to mention, they're going to listen to it. They'll smile, but you know that behind that smile, there's a frown. Right? Yeah. Siguro kung magbuka mo lang yung bibig na makina, sila. So, I've discovered that we need to avoid, however. We especially need to avoid but. So, may I invite you to use the word and. Because they'll hear your suggestion without the shields. Let me give an example. Raul, you're such a good worker. You're brilliant. Everybody likes you. You're always on time. And you know what? For you to be even better, you can do... See what I mean? Just so that you avoid them becoming defensive. Yeah. So, in Toastmasters, we keep saying, however, when we give our evaluations. And so, that's one of the things that I had to outgrow. That I had to absolutely get rid of. But here's the nice part. The subtlety may be missed by regular members or by the test speaker himself. But you know what? The judges don't miss it. They catch it. And then they realize, oh, he's trying to be gentle. To confront gently. Ayan. So, yan yung mga gusto kong i-share din sa inyo, no? One more thing that we as Toastmasters, we constantly say, but ultimately is still met with resistance. Areas for... Thank you for finishing that for me. Ibig sabihin, baon na sa inyo, di ba? Because the truth is, when you hear those words, area for improvement, it still carries a negative connotation. So, check this out. After so many times of evaluating people, I finally decided to evolve and say, opportunity for growth. Yeah. And I'd like to mention that as an opportunity for growth for you, you could try, because it doesn't hurt, di ba? I-say it in Tagalog, mas maganda pakinggan eh. Alam mo, gusto kitang bigyan ng pagkakataong lumago pa. Ito yung naisip ko. Ayan. Right? So, it takes the sting away from having to critique somebody. And when I coach people who will compete, for example, internationally, or they represent their hotel and they have to win the Mabuhay Awards, and some of you who work with hotels, you know what that's like. Yeah, 6 years in a row. Right. So, nanalo yung mga contestants namin kasi we're very gentle when we critique them. I mean, after all, the guy who cleans the pool, ano yan eh, simple lang yan. Baka high school nga lang tinapos niya, di ba? Tapos napili ng hotel na mag-represent ng hotel during their mabuhay competitions. Now, the poor guy is sitting there wondering, sir, kasi di ko naman hiningi na ako yung mag-represent eh. Pinadala ako ng HR. So, syempre, he's already scared. He's already nervous. And you're going to give him feedback. So, you have to be gentle, you know? The gloves go on. They don't come off. But then again, some other dude comes in, he's wearing a suit. He's obviously the manager, a manager of the hotel. And he said, yeah, I have a very busy schedule, but HR sent me here to represent the hotel. So, medyo, oops, attitude, right? The gloves come off. Alright, because hey, 6 years, we don't want to break the record. We want you to win. So if you don't mind, tough love. Right? So again, it's a matter of who you're facing and what they're having to deal with, because it's not just enough to have them understand what you're saying, because you both use English, but you also have to understand what's going on in here. Diba? The receptivity to what you're saying. Okay, moving on. So, how do we use it, no? Evaluations. Number one, pakibasa lang.
Competition.
Oh yeah, it's because you have to compete. I belong to the generation that had to deal with 15 speech projects for their basic communication and leadership. And so, I remember one time, how did I prepare? Here's what I did. Not knowing what the test speaker's project was going to be, although usually back in the 15 speech projects manual, that would have meant project number 7, putting it all together from the old manual. You know? So, because we were told what project was going to be used, you know what I did? Before digital to, I memorized all of the objectives of all 15 speech projects, knew it by heart. Totally internalized the bloody manual. So that when the contest occurred, I could quote verbatim all of the objectives, no matter what the project was. Ayan. Of course, it helped a lot that I talked with the test speaker, but I didn't do anything unethical. I didn't ask her what her project was or what her speech was. I just wanted to get a feel for her personality. Because I wanted to be sure that when I give feedback later to that delightful young lady, that it would not be to look brilliant at the expense of her emotions. You know what I'm saying, di ba? So, kinaibigan ko muna, having made some emotional deposits before the contest itself, I knew that when I get up there and I start, that when the shells start coming her way, she would be able to absorb them and still smile. Because there was the initial contact, there was the attempt to become her friend. And none of my other competitors did that. Again, here's another correlation between what we do in Toastmasters and how it can apply at work. If you're in sales or in marketing, they'll tell you, you build relationships first before you even begin to sell. Because you need to make sure that there is rapport, that there is a connection already established before you begin to say, oh, by the way, I represent Novartis. And, di ba, if you start out that way, medyo mata-turn off sila eh. So, they need to know who you are first. They need to feel comfortable around you. Yeah. So, if you're going to join a contest and you're going to be representing your club, your area, your division, then you absolutely need to know what you're about to evaluate. I'm not going to ask you to memorize all 10 of the projects in the manual. Nowadays, they tell you what project it'll be, right? Before you even compete. Do they? They still don't. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead and memorize all those objectives before you represent your club. Right. One of the other things that I did was, aside from preparing myself physically and mentally, I decided to do a psych job on my competitors. Oh yeah. I was going to make sure I was going to win. You know, here's what I did. I brought a bag of peanuts, you know, brain food, right? Bag of peanuts, small stack of Reader's Digest, right? So brought it with me. We sat in the holding area, and I said, guys, I know some of you are probably getting bored waiting for your turn. No, in reality, they weren't bored. They were scared to death, nervous when their time came. But you know, so I've pretty much read all of this. You know, if you want, you can read. Anybody here is hungry? You know, here's some peanuts, brain food. So then they began to eat. You know, of course, that's the worst thing you want to do, because when you eat the peanuts, later on you'll be going, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And then because you filled your brain with so many things, when you get out there, instead of being focused like a Zen ninja warrior, diba ganyan? You're in the moment, pinuno mo yung utak mo ng sobrang daming, nag-cram ka in essence. Pagdating mo doon, biglang, blanco ka, no? So, you know, sometimes you get creative. But that was just me absolutely determined to get victory. Alright, anyway, in competition, yes, you need to know the objectives. You need to know who you're going to evaluate. You need to know where she's coming from, di ba? And here's another thing. You need to know who the judges are. Oh, yeah. During my day, and you know what? I'll stop pointing at you because I know it makes you feel uncomfortable that when I refer to my generation. Anyway, during our time, my time, we normally refer to clubs in Manila, the Toastmasters Club in Manila, as the clubs where people like to have fun, fellowship, yeah. And then we normally refer to clubs in Makati as where they're serious about their learning. You know? So when I would find out that, oops, galing pala sa Manila clubs yung dalawang judge na yun. Okay, that means the way that I do my performance will somehow need to be entertaining for their sake. Oh, we have 3 judges from Makati. Oops, I need to sound brilliant and insightful for their sake. I shouldn't be too much of a clown. So, you know, you mix, di ba? You create a ratio that'll make sure that you win them over. Here's a very sneaky thing that you do. When you compete, you want the judges to think that you are performing for the benefit of the general membership. Di ba? But I say it's a trick because in reality, you are trying to please them more than the audience itself. Yun yung totoo yun eh. So, here's how I would do that sometimes in competition. When I'm giving my evaluation, ito yung lectern, of course I don't like using the lectern. I leave it, I walk among the audience. And what I'll do is, papunta ko niya sa audience, sasalita ako, and then very casually face one of the judges. Then now I'm talking to the judge, you know, and then moving to the next judge and looking at the test speaker, but then looking at the judge as if to find out, is he resonating with me? Is what I'm saying making sense to him as well? Because if he goes like that, then I know I've got him. Some of my points are locked in because of his reaction, right? So it's a subtle thing that we do to try to not be obvious about trying to win them over. But that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to win them over. In as much as when you give feedback to Toastmasters in your club meetings, you are trying to win them over, but you're also trying to make sure that you get public opinion on your side. Right? Okay. Moving on. Number 2. Out loud, please.
Counseling.
One of the most useful things you can get from this is how you give useful advice to people who are hurting, to people who are suffering. Ang laking tulong yan, no? Which is why I'd like to encourage everybody who is in here and who's active in Toastmasters to also find time to have activities in church. You know, find a church ministry. Be a counselor. Because if you think your skills as a Toastmaster is already good, it'll be boosted 100-fold if you take up a counseling ministry. Because that's where you begin to realize that, okay, I'm pretty good at impromptu speaking. I can think fast, you know, like Robin Williams, Quicksilver, no? However, you also have to temper yourself. That's why my question earlier, sabi ko, are there times when you find that even though you can say so many things, you decide to not say anything? You know, where you let your silence speak volumes for you? And the answer is yes. Because I've counseled people who were suicidal, And it really creeped me out when they, mano po, gumano sa akin, no? Simbahan, mano po. And then when he sat down, he was wearing short sleeves and he took off his jacket and I saw all of the slash marks from his wrist all the way to his elbow, both arms. And there I was with the, I'm pretty sure with the OMG look on my face. Like, ba't ako yung na-assign dito? Ganyan. Pero ngiti ka pa rin, yes. And although I could have said so many things, I realized all of them would have been Band-Aid. So the call there was for me to just zip it and listen. And if need be, cry with the person. Then when he's done, maybe give feedback. Diba? Yun eh. So it'll help you as well here. And number 3, out loud please. Now here's good news for everybody. This is where the moolah is. This is where the money is. Because when you become really skilled at giving feedback, then you get hired by companies, in hotels, right? Power plants, yeah. Then we help them hone their people's skills so that they get better at their white paper defenses. But let me manage your expectations by saying that when you start doing this, as an application of what you're learning here for evaluation, it's not about giving feedback that one time only. When we help people prepare for their white paper defenses, it can be as bad or as long as you make them speak 12 times, 15 times even. Because each evolution, you're whittling down what they're saying, you're helping them get more focused. So when you know that they're supposed to have 15 minutes to deliver their speech, you whittle it down until they can get it done, say in 10 minutes or less. Because judges everywhere will appreciate shorter presentations that are meaty. And it's always more difficult to give a short talk than it is to give a long talk. In fact, Abraham Lincoln was asked, Mr. President, how long would it take for you to prepare for a 4-minute speech? And then Abraham Lincoln said, give me 2 weeks. And then the reporter asked him again, how long would it take you to give a 4-hour speech? Abraham Lincoln took off his hat, raised his eyebrow like Spock, and said, I'm ready now. Because when you're limited in terms of time, there's a lot of editing you have to do. And you have to decide what goes in and what goes out. Diba? But unlimited time? No problem. Okay? Here's the challenge facing you now as the new generation of Toastmasters that we never had to face during our time. It's this. Managers, leaders, supervisors, or even you as team leaders, you have to work around giving advice or whatever you have to say in Instagram-sized doses. Here's the thing. If it does not fit the back of a calling card, whatever you want to tell somebody, if it cannot fit the back of a calling card when you write it out, then it's too long. Remember that the millennials, Gen Y, had YouTube designed around them because videos are seldom longer than 3 minutes. That's all they have tolerance for. And then today's generation of Gen Z, fresh graduates who are now joining the workforce, Facebook's video, remember Nas? When he talks about, and that's 1 minute! Tolerance nila, 1 minute lang. So if you must say something of value to anybody from their generation, it has to be behind the back of a calling card, that's all. And for people like us who belong to the boomers, me, the Gen Xers, Raul, then that's not our natural area of involvement, di ba? Mahaba tayo magsalita. Don't even get me started on what your grandfather or grandmother or your parents are like. Pag sinaway kayo, kasi yun, talagang mahaba yun pag nagsalita. Right? Okay. So, moving right along, pakibasa lang.
The success of your presentation will be judged not by the knowledge you send, but by what the listeners receive.
Yeah, and I think that pretty much sums up what I've been saying so far. No? So it's not so much the content, but it's how they take the content. Yeah, it's like when you're trying to help somebody get better, you tell them, "I'm sorry, but before you get better, you're going to feel worse, and then later on you'll get better." Yeah. Out loud, please.
The unprepared speaker has the right to be afraid.
Absolutely. Because if you are prepared, then there's no reason for that fear. There is no rational explanation where that angst or that worry is coming from. Okay? So the thing is that when we evaluate people, even though they're prepared, many of them are still afraid. They're still afraid. Especially when you get to those projects that are particularly difficult. For example, inspire your audience, right? A lot of you are worried when you get to that particular project. Or make it persuasive. Ooh, boy. Yan. Doon pala, yun yung mga challenging kasi show what you mean. Please. All you have to do is talk about tennis, or all you have to do is talk about swimming. And there's body language, and I'll make it, right? Here's the thing. If you want to get the most out of your Toastmasters membership, and you run across those beginning projects, believe it or not, some senior Toastmasters go back and take the basic communication and leadership manual all over again. You know, they get their CTMs or CS 2 or 3 times, paulit-ulit. And you know why they do that? Because when they get to projects like, say, number 4, show what you mean. I don't know if that's still the title of the project. See, during my time, ganun. Show what you mean. They will pick a topic that is not naturally conducive for body language. They will pick a topic that tries to limit their use of body language and see how they can work within that framework na hindi siya natural na mag-gesture ka talaga, just so that they will grow. Just so that they'll get better. Okay, moving on. Ito yung walang kupas nating COD. Pakibasa lang.
Content, objectives,
and for the large part, this is very useful. This is fine, no? But when you start to grow, when you start to evolve as a speaker, then you start to need new tools. Yeah, and I'd like to show some of them to you. I love this particular cycle. Ayan. Some of you who are practitioners of continuous process improvement, you understand this, di ba? Alam niyo to eh. So, when I started learning this, when I started to really absorb it, and then apply it to how I give evaluations or how I coach people for presentations, then it really caused me to experience a phenomenal growth in the way that I give feedback. Kasi, first it's defining, what is this guy trying to do? What is he doing? And then, where you measure. Remember, anything that you cannot measure, you cannot manage. Diba? Kaya importante yan eh. Merong mga metrics. Merong mga KPIs. Ayan, no? And then you analyze, how is he or she hitting or not hitting those KPIs? Tama ba yung mga metrics niya doon? You know, when I started to buy into this and really realize how crucial they were, that's when I started to take seriously the different aspects of a presentation. Like, for example, just listening to a person talk. All I'll do is listen to them for 10 seconds, then I can give a guesstimate about how fast they're talking. Right now, I'm clocking myself at around 175 to 180 words per minute. I know that because when I listen to myself talk for 10 seconds times 6, di ba? So, you listen to people and then you realize that when the priest says, brothers and sisters, we are here to fall asleep. Peace be with you. Diba talagang tutulugan ka? Kasi 120 words per minute yun eh. Talagang sobrang bagal, di ba? Pagka dextrometerone hydrochloride is a generic name, whatever that was, that's too fast. That's already hitting almost 200 words per minute. So, you start to create metrics. You start to define KPIs. And could we show briefly the Word document that I brought with me? I'm going to show you something, but I can't let you keep a copy of it kasi I did this for my client. Tapos alam mo naman, non-disclosure contracts, di ba? But I just want the Word document. Anyway, well, yeah. Okay. Because I came up with an evaluation form, and this one, and maybe we could just like, yeah. Okay, where I would listen to them, deliver their speech, and then I itemized, I deconstructed what their speech needs to be like. And so this means that when I did this, it was in consultation with their HR, with their department heads. What are you looking for in a great presentation? And so we defined it together, and then we met the participants, the people that I was going to train, and I got their consent that these will be the things that I will be watching out when you talk. So can we scroll down a little bit? Alright, so napakarami. But, you know, and I always try to go for metrics, no? Like gestures, 2 per sentence. Imagine that. No? Pati yun, binibilang ko talaga. And when I talk about aspirated pauses, I have a total of 10 that I look out for unless my client adds to it. For example, ang alam lang kasi natin sa Toastmasters is but I have included okay, well, you know, actually, basically, and so, and then the stretch syllables because you don't know what to say next. Yun, sinasabi ko yun. And then something peculiar to call centers is like, it's like, naku po, yun, binibilang ko na rin yun. So, when I listen to them and I act as an accountant, it's very detailed, it's very specific. And you wonder, sir, how can you do all of those in just 5 to 7 minutes while they're talking? I said, I've learned to multitask. A skill I observe in millennials and Gen Z that I've learned to borrow as well. Remember before the anti-distracted driving law, di ba? I had a DVD player in my car and not a single accident in the 7 years that I had it. It made driving in traffic bearable. And then somebody wrote a law against it. So now I'm really like bored, stiff. Buti lang nagsasalita yung way sa akin. Diba? Anyway, and so all those things I look for. But I put a premium on the KPIs that look at content. Imagine this, oh. Approachability through voice. Further defined as sounding friendly or tolerant. Diba? So, as you grow, you start to really look for defining. What are we looking for in developing this person? Yeah.
Tolerant, like how? What do you mean by that?
Sorry?
Tolerant, what do you mean by that?
Is it the tone of voice? Sometimes when a person talks, you just hear them use a tone of voice that, where they say, remember, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to defend democracy. And then the tone of voice says, yeah, but you're not there to practice it. You know, so when you say, this is just a suggestion, but the way you come across is, oops, no, that doesn't sound like a suggestion to me. It sounds more like a command. Thank you for asking. So I pick up on those nuances and I communicate it to them when I evaluate. There are so many things that aren't in our manuals. There are so many things that are not as well defined in the evaluator's sheet, diba? And so one of the things that you will realize as you mature in the movement in Toastmasters is the need to define better. Yeah. So okay, can go back to the slides. Okay. So far so good, guys.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going too fast. Okay, good. Thanks. 25 minutes. All right. So aside from the continuous process cycle that I use, okay, ayun, no? I also use this. And I share this with you because when you talk about suggestions with your learners or the one that you're evaluating, you have to balance things. Look at this chart, no? So on this side is effort and cost. Now, when we talk about cost, it's not necessarily just about money, it's about time. No? How difficult it is, how long it'll take, and ano yung benefit. So, clearly, anything with low effort and low cost but it has a high benefit, ayun ang bigay mo. For example, I remember this time when I was teaching at Vineyards, there were two guys who came to me and said, Sir, malapit na po kasi yung MBA thesis defense namin. Ano may ipapayo mo? Sabi sa akin. Sabi ko, first of all, the moment is upon you. There's not much I can say that may help you out. But if you're serious about taking the edge off, feeling scared when your professional panel starts to interrogate you, let me tell you a little secret. Sabi ko ganyan. Before you knock on that door and enter the thesis defense room, imagine those three people owe you money. And so they listened to me, and so there was this cognitive awareness, pero wala yung affective buy-in. So I had to add to my comment, I said, ganito, remember that uncle who really loved you very much? In his last will and testament, he said, because my nephew is such a good nephew, I want to give him 1 million pesos. He bequeathed it to you, hoping that he will make something good out of it. Kaya, so again, yung mindset na binigay ko sa nila. Nagkataon that one of those judges, who is also your friend, decided to call you one night, bro, kailangan ko talaga ng pera, emergency lang, meron ka bang 1 million? And then naisip mo na, binigyan ako ng uncle ko. Kaya sabi natin, we are blessed to be a blessing. So syempre, paano ko ipagdadamot sa kanya, kaibigan ko siya, pinahiram mo ngayon yung 1 million mo sa kanya. Di ba? Then after 1 year, na hindi mo siya masagot, hindi mo siya ma-contact, hindi mo siya no response to you kasi nag-abroad pala, feeling mo, tinakbo yung pera mo. Now, you tracked him down and found out that he's right behind the wall, and you're about to get your money back after 1 year na pinagtataguan ka na humiram sa'yo. Langhiya ka. Bigay yun ng uncle ko, pinamana sa akin ang pera ko! Diba? So that completely changes their mindset. So you know, when they approach the door where their thesis defense will occur, is suddenly more like this. Diba? Na para bang, open up the door. This is the law. Again. So when they open up the door, they go, with this confident, may konting angas look that says, good morning, sir, ma'am, I'm ready to defend my thesis. Now, when they enter the door and say that because of the way they feel, two things will happen right away. The professors or the professional panel will think, he's absolutely ready. Diba? Number two, he's probably the author. Right? Pero, kung wala kang mindset na ganyan, and you approach your thesis defense, you're going to knock like this. And you have that silly grin, parang ngiting aso. When you enter the door, good morning, sir. I'm here to defend my thesis. And they're going to think only two things. Number one, roadkill. Right? He's not prepared. Number two, siya ba talaga nagsulat nito? And so what should have been a 1-hour defense becomes 2 hours. But dude, sabi ko sa kanila, all you have to do, so low effort, low cost, high benefit, sabi ko, all you have to do, isipin mo, may utang silang malaki sa'yo. Naku, kita mo, yung 1 hour mo, kalahating oras lang. They don't have to ask you too much because you projected all of that confidence. Of course, when they get out of the door, then suddenly all of the adrenaline drains away and then they realize, oh my God, I just barked at them. Di ba? But that's fine. You know, it helped you get through it. High benefit, low effort, low cost. Some of the suggestions we're going to give as Toastmasters to our listeners will be on the ridiculous side almost. Di ba? Like, we say stuff like, oh, you go to the bathroom and then you practice your speech there, you know, nobody's looking, and then you use different voices and tones. First of all, everybody's going to think you're crazy doing stuff like that. And then the ones who have to go to the toilet, oy! Ano ba ginagawa mo dyan? Lumabas ka na. Di ba? Kailangan ko nang gamitin yan. So, high effort, high cost, goodwill among dormitory mates. Di ba? And ano yung benefit doon? I just learned that I sound this way in the toilet. But I don't sound this way in real life. Kasi wala na yung tiles eh. So, so always think about, is it low effort, low cost, high benefit, or is it high effort, high cost with some benefit? So when you give suggestions, try to use this framework and it will make wonders for the way that you give feedback. So far so good. By the way, managers and supervisors in companies all over the world would also like you to give suggestions during their ManCom and ExeCom that are framed this way. Because those are the ones that are likely to be approved. Right? Okay, moving on. Kpis with metrics, I guess I've already explained that, so we'll just say as a short phrase for this, always go for the key performance indicator because you can't go wrong if you cleave to that. then you know what you're doing is a perfect fit. Now let's talk about how do you stay sharp. Because one of the things that we struggle with is maintaining that cutting edge. And that's why Toastmasters, especially those who like to go into training as a work, diba? Or Toastmasters who like to compete, they need to stay sharp. And clearly one of the best ways to do that is to keep your mind agile. Keep it always working. When they did the anti-distracted driving law, you know what I was forced to do to avoid boredom? I'm going to suggest this to you now. Every car that I see on the road, when I look at their plate number, like ADJ 4142, for example, no? I create instantly a story about the plate number. Okay? Oh, Adam, AD, and Daniel jumped 41 feet 47 times. Para lang maiwasan yung bagot pag ako yung nagdadrive. Okay, MAD. Oh, crazy, kaya pala siya matulin. So like, and you add sometimes a number 4142, 415, 426. Okay, 5 and 6 is 11. Put 1 and 1 together, it's still 2. All right, so I do mental calisthenics just to avoid the boredom and make sense out of the numbers that I see on the road or some other things. So just keep your mind agile. Out loud, please.
To acquire knowledge, one must study, but to acquire wisdom, one must observe.
Yeah, and that's certainly one of the best ways to stay sharp is be observant, not just of yourself, but of what others are doing. So, may I suggest that for those of you who have been in the movement for, say, 2 years, 3 years, and you're looking for ways to keep growing, let me suggest other organizations that you can get involved in. For example, PSTD, Philippine Society for Training and Development. A lot of mega nerds out there, so you're bound to learn from them as well, diba? But eventually you'll outgrow even that. Then you will want to join an organization that discusses truly meaty topics. And that's why the pin I wear these days is this one. It's PMAP, People Management Association of the Philippines. I remember feeling my jaw drop to the carpet when during one of their GMMs, General Membership Meetings, sa Sofitel pa, sa sarap ng buffet. Di ba? Spiral no? I remember the topic for that day was a comparative analysis of compensation across industries. And my jaw just dropped when I heard, for example, that bankers, diba, especially pag nasa management level ka na and beyond, have the highest compensation of any industry. Bankers. And those are the people you give your money to. Diba? So remember, they're very, very well paid. Okay? And then I found out that call centers and BPOs have the higher, what do you call this, entry-level salaries than pretty much any other organization. Makes sense too, kasi based magkaroon ng turnover, di ba? They have to find ways to keep people attracted. And many other things that I heard. So I remember having to pick up my jaw from time to time and reattach it kasi very mind-blowing yung mga narinig ko doon. So like eventually you'll have to expand your wings, look at what other organizations have to offer and grow from them. A new organization that we're organizing is called PACT, Professional Advocacy for Consultants and Trainers. It's barely 2 months old and we're fast growing as a group. Look us up on Facebook, PACT, PACT, Professional Advocacy for Consultants and Trainers, where we talk about best practices we share it with each other and warn each other about common pitfalls that occur. Ayan. So, moving on, be like SpongeBob. Kasi kung observant tayo, it means that anything you encounter should be fertilizer for growth. Yeah. And here's what I'm saying. Sometimes kasi, tao lang tayo. We enter a situation and we bring our biases with us into that situation, di ba? So, for example, when I went to Indonesia for 3 weeks to do a program there for a big company that I cannot name. So I had to remind myself many times to suspend my biases, my internal biases. You know, stuff like, why do they disappear from my classroom 3 times a day? Then I was told by my interpreter, no, sir, they do that 5 times a day. Yeah, is it something I said or di naman siguro? Yun pala, several times a day they have to go out and pray. Face Makkah, that's Mecca, Makkah, and then take 15 minutes to pray. And so that initially threw me off. And then, whatever it is they call mild is maanghang. Yung mga satay nila, nakala mo mild. Okay, let me try that. Kinasubukan bigla. You know, like, talagang suko ka. And then you wonder, why are people driving Benzes, BMWs, and Audis always afraid of scooters and motorcycles in this country? Like, ang layo talaga nila. Why? Because their law says that whoever drives the smaller vehicle is always the victim. Yun yung batas nila eh. Mean to say, you're minding your own business, you're waiting at the stoplight, suddenly a scooter bumps into your car. So, ang laki ng gasgas sa BMW mo. Pag lumapit yung police doon, ikaw kaagad yung may kasalanan. Di ba? Thank God for CCTV. Yan. But that's their mindset over there. So I went around observing that and realized na my reaction, what? Ganyan, no? I had to suspend that. Be like a sponge, absorb, so you can learn. Because if you're not absorbent, you're not learning. Right? Kailangan willing ka to observe. Learn a new skill. It doesn't matter what it is. Learn a new language, learn to play chess, learn how to swim. But learning a new skill will stimulate your neurons in new ways. Diba? One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was teaching my, back then, 7-year-old daughter how to swim. Did it in 3 weeks. Only every weekend. Kasi sa UP, nag-varsity ako for swimming. And I taught my daughter and made her fearless. It's the first time she saw the deep part of the pool. Sabi, Papa, ayoko. Sabi ko, anak, Zuri, you don't have to be afraid of the deep. Just remember this, don't be afraid of the water. Respect the water, but you don't have to be afraid of it. Yeah. And respect means following rules. Yeah. Never swim alone, that's one. Yeah. Etc. So, I taught her how to do that. The first thing I taught her was how to be drown-proof. Now, to convince her, I had to show her. Diba? So, went straight to the deep part, pinatali ko yung wrist ko sa likod, 2 kamay. Pinatalian ko yung knees ko, 2. And I jumped into the water. I heard her gasp just before I hit the water. Nun siya, no? Then I showed her that I wasn't drowning. And so, when I got up, by the way, just so that I can get the mental picture out of your minds. What did Dino do? Ganito lang yon. When you enter the water, what you do is you release the air, so you're not buoyant, you sink. And then you time your approach to the bottom, you push. And then when you surface, you take a breath, and then release all of that right away, then you sink again. And all I did was jump up and down, until I got to the shallow part. I was drown-proof. Then when she realized that you don't have to drown by just following the rules, respecting the water, then she became brave. I remember the first time I took her to Sophia. Takbo siya sa pool. Dug sa 12 portion ng pool. Yung malalim. And I watched that poor lifeguard, yung parang bang yung puso niya, yung kaluluwa niya, parang lumabas yung bibig. Kasi, gano'n siya. So sabi ko, and then when I jumped into the water, I found her waiting for me, lying down on the tiles, nakaganito. Nakaganito. So, ang ginawa ko, pagdating ko sa ilalim, gumanon din ako. Tapos nag-antayan kami, tingnan natin kung sino muna susuko. Then, of course, she goes up for smaller lungs after all. Anyway, learn a new skill. Because when you do, you're always stimulating your brain. You're always making yourself mentally agile. My son, who wants to become a priest, learned Latin on his own, self-study, just so that he could understand the Tridentine Mass. And then when he heard about the miracles in Naju, you know what he did? He's now learning Korean. Oh yeah. And his immersion training by watching YouTube videos of Korean comedies, Korean shows, telenovelas. he can now write in Korean. Holy cow! Well, 18-year-old. So, like SpongeBob. Diba? Learn a new skill. Be mentally agile. So, for some of you who are into gadgets, there are so many downloadable apps, di ba? Yung mga, hanapin mo yung combination ng mga words na pwede. And if you really want to be stimulated, download an app that causes you to compete with other people around the world who are using that app at the same time that you're using it, kasi you can lose points or make points based on how they perform against you. Yeah. So later on, I'll show you some of the apps that I have on my phone kasi yun yung ginagamit ko para exercise yung utak ko. Yeah. Be fit. No substitute for this. Raul? I know you love to eat. Be fit. The reason is, if you're going to evaluate people, if you're going to be good at it, you need to have a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients getting to your brain. And it's not going to happen if we're not fit. Yeah. So, at my age, I still run 8 or 10K every other day. Yeah. For fun, for exercise, no? But I can do 21 in 2 hours and 36 minutes. Tomorrow, I have a speedball competition to attend and a room clearing for close quarters battle to participate in. Airsoft, yeah, that's me. So, it's fun to be able to outlast and hit guys who are more than half my age. Ayan. Anyway, so be fit, no? Kasi when you're fit, you can do so many things and you can think fast, you can speak fast. All right. So let me conclude by sharing with you this short story. There was a family. There was a family na ang nangyari sa kanila, yung anak nilang panganay decided one day he wanted to become a priest. Schoolmates also wanted to become priests. So the three of them decided to enter the seminary. And naging pari sila. But the thing was, they each joined a different order. So one day, after they got ordained, they got together, nag-reunion sila. And during the reunion, one of the friends, tatlo sila no? Said, you know what, we figured out how to make sure that we have enough money to give to the poor and we have enough money for church operations. When we send the basket out to do the collections, we draw a circle on the floor, we throw the money in the air, and whatever lands in the circle stays for church operations. And whatever lands outside of the circle, we give that to the poor. And then one of the barkada said, oh, we have a different way of doing it. In our church, we take up a collection, and afterwards, we draw the same circle that you draw, we throw the money in the air, and whatever lands face down, we keep for church operations, and whatever lands edge up, we give to the poor. Oh, cool. So the third guy said, oh, we have an even better way of doing that. We take up a collection, we draw a circle, and then afterwards we throw all of the money in the air. Whatever lands on the ground, we keep for church operations. Whatever stays in the air, we give to the poor. So anyway, I share that story, not naman to poke fun at our church, no? But simply to say that even in evaluation, there's so many ways to do the same thing, but you're always looking for the better way. You always got to. Remember, don't aim for perfection. Aim for progress. Something doable. And with that, I'd like to end today's session. Thank you.